Big trucks, tailgating on Super Bowl Sunday, barbecue ribs, and soul-crushing student debt. Welcome to the good old USA.
Hey, I'm Lexi Limitless. I'm an accredited travel agent and the youngest person to travel to every country. Our world is an amazing place just waiting for you to explore, and I want to help. I'm here to teach you the major things you need to know before you go. In this series, we're covering every country in order from most visited to least visited. And because nobody likes taking notes, I even have a free tip sheet in the description ready to go for you. But now, ladies and gentlemen, please put your seat back and tray table in the upright and locked position, because we're taking off for the best travel tips and places of every country.
Let's dive into perhaps one of the most interesting countries in North America, the United States. Known for its diverse food, rugged terrain, and its love of baseball and football, not soccer. In the last year alone, there have been 22 million visitors, making this the third most visited country in the world. I'm an American, so I was born and raised in a small town between Sacramento and Lake Tahoe in Northern California. My hometown, Nevada City, has a population of about 3,000 people, and one of my favorite parts of my hometown is that it has a beautiful river running through it. Since I grew up in California with so many things to do, I spent a lot of time snowboarding in Lake Tahoe, and I can't emphasize enough how amazing it was to explore the Sierra Nevadas in California. From the waterfalls to the lakes and mountains and hot springs, I had so much fun growing up here. Although I was lucky enough to be able to travel around the world internationally with my family while growing up, since my mom has a travel agency, I actually haven't seen that much of the USA. Believe it or not, I've traveled to every country in the world, and I've only seen 10 states in the US. Some of the amazing places I've seen include New Orleans, the PNW, and of course, the infamous New York City. I have so much more to see in my own country, but my favorite places that I've been to so far have gotta be Hawaii and Florida. And I actually recently moved to Miami Beach in South Florida, and I honestly had no idea that the weather could be so beautiful anywhere in the world. I also love how much Latin influence is there in its culture. It truly feels like a melting pot. I'm so proud to be from what may be the most diverse country in the world, and no matter where I go, the US will always be home. Alright, you want to travel here, so let's take it back to the basics. The land. The United States is massive, and it shares a border with Canada in the north and Mexico in the southwest. There are so many areas, cultures, and people coming together that it's no wonder it's the third most visited country in the world. As for its surrounding waters, the US borders the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean, the Gulf of Mexico, and the Bering Sea. Outside of the United States, the US has several territories such as Puerto Rico, Guam, and many other minor outlying islands. The terrain in the US is anything but consistent. In the Northeast, there are mountains and beaches, while in the Midwest, there are more flat plains. The South is known for its heat and humidity, while the Southwest is where you'll find sand dunes and terrains that look like it's from Mars. The West Coast is much sunnier, known for its beaches, surfing, and national parks. Finally, the Pacific Northwest is full of mountains and, most of all, rain. It might not be a surprise that the most visited city in the US is not its capital, Washington, D.C., but it's New York City. If you plan on visiting the US, the most popular places to fly into are the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport, which also happens to be one of the busiest airports in the world. Or you can also fly into the Dallas-Fort Worth International Airport, Denver Airport, Chicago O'Hare, LAX, and Charlotte Douglas International Airports. Whatever region of the US you're planning on visiting, there is bound to be a large international airport nearby. The people. You might not already know this, but the US does not have an official language. However, English is the most commonly used and spoken by about 73% of Americans. Outside of this, 1 in 5 people speak a language other than English at home. For example, 62% of Americans speak Spanish at home, followed by Chinese, Tagalog, Vietnamese, and Arabic. In just about every large city in the US, you can find English speakers, so it's safe to say that you can visit the US only speaking English. As for religion, almost half of Americans identify as Protestant Christians. Other religions include Catholicism, Judaism, Mormonism, Jehovah's Witness, Buddhism, Hinduism, Eastern Orthodox Christianity, and other non-Christian faiths. Like I said, this place is a melting pot. The weather. As for the weather, it's almost funny to try to summarize this about the US because it's anything from very predictable to very unpredictable. The average temperature across the entire US is about 54 degrees Fahrenheit. Especially as you move towards the northwest coast, you can expect to find the most rain, with the average temperatures in the summer around 60 degrees Fahrenheit. On the southern west coast, you can expect summertime temperatures of 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In the southwest region, the summer can exceed 100 degrees Fahrenheit on a daily basis. Throughout the Midwest and New England, you can expect warmer temperatures as well, with an average of 80 degrees Fahrenheit. In the south, the warm weather continues with an average summertime temperature of 85 degrees. If you plan to travel to the US in the summer, I recommend heading towards one of the coasts to soak up some time on the beach. For the most enjoyable weather, you should visit during the late spring or early fall and head inland to visit a national park or explore one of the many big cities. When you're planning your trip, keep in mind the time of year you were going, as well as any potential natural disasters that tend to occur during those times. For example, don't plan to visit Florida during hurricane season from June to November if you can avoid it. There are also regions of the US which stand out from any of the others found throughout the country. For example, Alaska, the largest state, is one you may only want to visit during the summer, while tropical Hawaii off the west coast is best visited during the spring. Alright, now that you have a general idea of what the US is like, let's dive into what you need to know before you go. As a traveler, you can never truly know everything before you arrive in a new place, and you'll always run into surprises. So it's important to do your own research. But I at least want to get you up to speed on the most important things to know so that you have a solid foundation for your trip, starting with visas. I'm not gonna sugarcoat it. If you are a foreigner looking to visit the US, you should know in advance that our immigration system can be very intense. Please do ample research to check if you are eligible to enter the country before you get on the plane. If you're visiting the US from one of the 39 visa waiver program countries, you won't need to apply for paperwork before you travel. You can see if you qualify to travel to the US without a visa by visiting usa.gov. But if you want to work or study in the US, then you'll need to apply for a visa well in advance. Cultural customs. I've got to be honest, after living my whole life in the US, it's hard to take a step back and think about all the cultural customs that are just a part of my daily life. But I've come up with a few that I think are the most important and will help you have a successful trip to the US. Let's dive in. Americans love being on time. Even if you're a few minutes late, it's expected that you apologize and acknowledge that you didn't make it when you agreed you would. Don't stress if having a more relaxed relationship with time is a part of your lifestyle. As long as you let us know that you'll be late, we're happy to wait. We're also known to be a little direct. There's not a lot of beating around the bush when it comes to our conversations. We appreciate direct communication and value being open and honest. So don't take this the wrong way. We don't set out to be rude. We just appreciate honest conversations from the start, and we get straight to the point. Americans also love to talk, and sometimes too loudly. So don't let our blunt behavior come off as a sign that we're not interested in engaging with you, because we are. We're interested in learning and chatting and meeting new people, and if you ever don't know what to say, the weather and sports are always safe topics. As with traveling anywhere in the world, keep in mind that you're in someone else's home, so please be respectful. Language. If you know English, you'll be just fine wherever you find yourself in the US. Since there's no official language, you'll also find many areas of the country where Spanish is spoken. But if you only know English, don't let that stop you from visiting any areas, as you will definitely find an English speaker nearby. If you're a beginner at English, there are a few important phrases that can make your trip easier, such as knowing how to ask, "Where is the bathroom?" saying please and thank you, and the infamous question, "How are you?" Water. Across the US, tap water is safe to drink. It's common to find drinking fountains in big cities, public buildings, and frequently visited locations like public parks. Also, as always, just make sure to ask a local before you drink because some tap water just doesn't taste great, especially in big cities. Cell phone and internet. If you're planning your trip to the US and you'll think you'll need cell phone service, I recommend first checking with your phone carrier for an international travel package. But you can always purchase a SIM card so you can use local data once you arrive. Before you visit, check out your options for purchasing a SIM card from large cellular carriers like Verizon and AT&T. If you don't have a SIM card before you arrive, you can pick one up at one of these cellular carrier stores or tech stores. When it comes to coverage, it really depends on where in the US you'll be visiting. If you're going to be hiking in the Utah desert, then you can expect to have zero coverage. But if you're in larger cities, you'll have about 5G of cellular service. It's safe to assume that as you head more into rural areas, the service declines. If you're not planning on needing to make a lot of international calls, you can grab free Wi-Fi from coffee shops like Starbucks, hotels, and libraries. Transportation. Public transportation in the US. Dare I say its downfall. Most big cities have some form of public transportation that works just fine. But if you're looking for a more flexible option, I recommend renting a car if you're basically anywhere outside of New York City. That way you don't have to be as dependent on unreliable public transportation, even if it's technically available where you're visiting. I know, it's confusing. Keep in mind that public transportation varies heavily from city to city, with most small to mid-sized cities not having any reliable or easy-to-use transportation options. If you travel throughout the US, it's best to fly domestically or rent a car. Taxis and ride-sharing apps are widely available in big cities, but can be non-existent in smaller destinations, so make sure to keep this in mind when you're planning your trip to the US. Outlets and converters. In the US, you'll use type A and B sockets. Compared to other parts of the world, the US has a low voltage of 120. Make sure to purchase a converter before you travel if your home country has a higher voltage. That way you can get out of your trip without starting any fires. If you're a frequent traveler, you can get yourself a universal adapter which adjusts to the prongs of the plug in whatever country you're visiting. Safety. In general, you can have a safe experience visiting the US. While it's true that crime is prevalent, it's important to research the areas you'll be visiting and plan the times of day that you'll be there. Pickpocketing isn't a huge thing here, but it does occur, especially in major cities. So make sure to keep an eye on your belongings when you're in busy areas or on public transportation. If you're a solo female, you can safely enjoy traveling in the US. Just remember to explore during the day and stay away from getting intoxicated. And if you are alone, make sure to share your itinerary with your loved ones and know where to find your embassy. Accommodation. There are so many accommodation options in the US that you'll be sure to find something in your budget. In larger cities, you'll be able to find hostel options, while on the outskirts, Airbnbs and hotels have become much more popular. It's probably surprising that big cities are the most expensive when it comes to accommodation. The average for a modest hotel is about $125 to $200 US per night. Hostels are a great option if you're traveling solo and want to save money, but keep in mind that hostels typically only exist in large cities, with the average price being $35 to $40 per night. Before booking any accommodation, I always recommend reading the reviews on TripAdvisor. You can also find accommodation options that work for you on Booking.com, Hostelworld, Hotels.com, and Expedia. Money and budget. You can really soak up the US on a budget or shoot for the moon with how much you want to spend. I've put together several budgets with how much you can expect to pay per day in the US. Keep in mind that these are estimates as prices can vary a lot, especially in big cities and top tourist destinations during peak seasons. In this guide, you'll find that these numbers include accommodation, food, transportation, and activities for one person. If you're backpacking in the US on a tight budget, and especially if you're camping, you can get away with spending between $20 and $80 a day. If you want to travel a little more comfortably, then you can expect to spend between $80 and $180 a day. But if you decide to go all in on the experience, at a minimum per day, you'll be spending $180. Remember that these are just averages. Prices from city to city in the US are very different, so make sure to do some research about the area you're heading to and keep your budget in mind. In terms of currency, the US uses the dollar. Many major credit cards are widely accepted, so you should bring yours along. But if you stumble into a few markets or smaller restaurants, some of them are still cash only, so I'd recommend traveling with at least $200 in cash with you at all times. On the flip side, in some major cities like Los Angeles, I've even started to see stores that are cashless, so you'll need to pay by card in those places. Also, one of my favorite tips is to travel with your money stored in different locations, just in case something is lost or stolen. Most banks will have dollars available for you to convert your currency into before your trip, but once you land, you can always get some at an ATM, a bank, or the airport. I always recommend making sure that you have a currency converter app that's available offline to use before your trip. This will keep you from overspending on wild tourist destinations, and you'll know exactly how much you're spending on that overpriced slice of avocado toast. So now that you're up to speed on the basics, here are a few experiences that you can't miss. I've curated some of the best information about the US, not only from my own personal experiences, but also from those of locals and other travel experts to bring you the experiences that, in my opinion, you won't want to miss. Now, if you're from the US or you've been here and you feel like there's something that I've missed or even something that I've overhyped, please feel free to share in the comments. I want everyone in the Limitless Army to learn from each other's experiences, so I look forward to reading what you have to say in the comments, but for right now, I'll get started with the Grand Canyon. When you think of the Wild West, you probably think of cowboys and rodeos. But what about the Grand Canyon? This national park in Arizona keeps topping the list as one of the most sought-after destinations to visit in the US. Besides the park being an amazing place to hike and go whitewater rafting, its panoramic views are simply breathtaking. In 2021, the park had over 4 million visitors who enjoyed sweeping views over the Colorado River, cutting through the closest thing we have to Mars. If you're planning a trip here and want to do some small hikes with big views, I recommend taking the Cape Royal Viewpoint or the Hermit Trail. Even if you can't make it to the Grand Canyon National Park, you can't go wrong with visiting any of the US's 423 national park units. Another one of my favorites has gotta be Yosemite National Park. New Orleans. There are some amazing cities in the US, from LA to New York, from Miami to Chicago, but one of my absolute favorites is New Orleans. If you love food, culture, and having a little fun, you can't miss New Orleans. Seated on the southwest coast of Louisiana, you'll find a city full of colorful beads, dancing, and some of the most interesting culture in the US. New Orleans is where you'll find a deep mix of Creole culture combined with French influence. This unique combination makes one of the oldest cities in the US one you shouldn't miss. Last but not least, take a road trip. I promise you will not regret it. And as I mentioned, one of the best and easiest ways to see the US is by car. So you can't really go wrong with picking a coast and driving its entire length. This will take some time, especially if you really want to soak up each destination. There's really nothing like driving down the California's Highway 1 and looking out over the Pacific and seeing the rugged mountain ranges and soaking up the dozens of scenic spots and beaches along the way. Even if the coast isn't your thing, there are plenty of other routes to take across the country, like the infamous Route 66, which takes you from Chicago, Illinois to Los Angeles, California. Whether you travel straight through the middle, across the top, take southern routes, you're bound to find some beautiful spots during your cross-country road trip. Since there are so many places in the US that top this list for me, I'm gonna go through some honorable mentions. The entire Southwest, from Moab, Utah to Monument Valley, Bryce Canyon National Park, the rocky and desert landscapes are just waiting to be explored. We also can't forget the Pacific Northwest. From the Seattle fish markets to the redwood forests of Northern California, it's perfect for the outdoorsy adventurers who don't mind just a little bit of rain. The tropical beaches of Hawaii is where you'll find everything from mountains and volcanoes to major surfing culture. Wherever you travel in the US, you're bound to find some hidden gems that are worth writing home about. Now you have everything you need to start your own trip to the US. If you would like more weekly content as well as a PDF printout with all of this information for your upcoming trip, sign up for my newsletter in the description or go to lexilimitless.com/newsletter. Also, for my fellow Americans, leave a comment letting me know if I missed anything or if there's anything that you would want the Limitless Army to know about our home country. Thank you so much for watching, and until next time, let's push our limits.